Um, all right, well, I'm excited to introduce Max Coles today. He is an SEO manager at 2 Octobers, and he is going to be taking us through 10 SEO opportunities for low-hanging fruit. So thank you all for joining us today, and I will hand it over to you, Max.
Well, welcome everybody. Excited to be here. I'm excited to get into this. This is something that we have spent a lot of time on, and particularly for SEO clients that are really kind of metric driven. This is going to be really powerful stuff. So getting into it, we've got keywords that are sitting just on the cusp, right? We've got them in positions anywhere from 5 to 25, but we just can't snag those top 5 spots, or maybe even more irksome, we can't snag kind of the top 10. We're sitting at 11, 12, something like that. We've used these tips, I would say, several times to do this, but particularly, I kind of have a client in mind. We've used these tips to get from page 2, even page 3 to page 1 in about 60 days. Just kind of reviewing individual pages and going through these 10 steps. So we're going to do a few things today. We're going to go over what exactly low-hanging fruit is, kind of where it is, how we find it, etc. We're going to go over our 10 optimizations or 10 checks that we really want to go through every time we're looking at this stuff. We're going to do a little giveaway towards the end, and you'll get a bit more context about that as we go through the presentation. And we'll have a Q&A at the end. So if you guys have any questions, you can either put them into chat and we'll get back to them, or if they're something that I need to address, I'll kind of tackle it immediately. But just know that we do have a session set up at the end, so we'll get time to chat about all this and kind of clarify some things. My name is Max Coles, as Chris so graciously said. I'm definitely kind of more on the technical side. That's where my interests lie. I have a lot of kind of curiosity when it comes to content, a lot of clients that I do local stuff on in terms of, getting those pesky near me searches. I've been here for about 2.5 years. And I've been doing SEO pretty much since day one. So this is definitely my focus. I kind of touch all realms in terms of SEO, and sometimes move a little bit outside of this realm, in fact. 2 Octobers were fabulous. Shameless plugs. We got certified as a B Corp. We're really trying to do our best in terms of putting our people and our planet kind of before our financial goals. We really want to make sure that we're delivering value, that we're a positive impact on the world, and then more locally on our communities and on our employees and our clients. So definitely check that out. B Corp is a fun thing, especially if you're considering B Corp certification. We have a lot of information on the website about it. So have you ever looked at SEMrush and seen this graph and you think to yourself, oh geez, I've got 20 to 100 on lock, but how the heck do I get up into those gold positions? How the heck am I going to get this well, frankly, kind of converting and getting clicks at a higher rate? I'm clearly on the right path. What do I do? And that's where we're going to go for low-hanging fruit. Low-hanging fruit, a lot of people say this many different ways. Maybe it's kind of your striking distance was a word that was used in our circles, or on the edge, or teetering, or nearly there, whatever it may be. Typically, low-hanging fruit is going to be kind of keywords which are high value or high potential value, but that aren't being actualized in a meaningful way. So you may have high impressions, but not necessarily the click-through rate to back it up. Typically, we're going to be looking at specific funnel stages. if this page is going to be comparison content, great, that's mid-funnel, and there are kind of specific words like versus or best, where you're looking for that informational, convincing content. It's going to have a lot to do with your business, obviously. You got to make sure that it's kind of niched properly for you to be relevant and helpful. And then at the end of the day, frankly, it's about how easy they are, right? So how many competitors do we have? Are they just absolutely killing it on these keywords, or are they kind of slouching and we can take it from them? So typically, the best place for this kind of free, out of the box and simple is going to be going straight to Google Search Console. And they give you 3 primary metrics. Those are impression volume, click-through rate or clicks, and then your average position for those queries. So when you're looking through this data, you're going to be kind of comparing and contrasting these metrics to get a sense of how each query is performing. Typically, this is how I think about it. Particularly the bold text down here at the bottom is kind of how I tend to think about it in a general sense. So impression volume is your potential. It's how many people are seeing it. Your clicks or your click-through rate is your actual. Are you actually enticing these people to click on the page, which is, easier said than done. And your position is essentially your perceived authority on a topic. That's more about how Google sees you. So are you passing their tests in terms of technical? Are you relevant in terms of local? And is the content hitting the nail on the head? And typically you're going to kind of mix and match these. So impression volumes, depending on the size of your site, you really do kind of want to be looking for impression volumes that are reasonable. We're not going to be going for long tail on a lot of these. We want to really make sure that we're optimizing our big, voluminous keywords. Click-through rate typically is about kind of on-page SEO. This is about making sure that your potential customers are seeing exactly what you want them to see on the organic listing page. So, do you have a good description of the page? Are you prompting them to perform an action? Is your title relevant? Maybe you even have site links that are displaying because you're ahead of the game. And then position, again, we're getting into kind of technical things. So do you have enough links internally and externally, et cetera? But there is a significant amount of research in terms of position that shows that basically anything under position 9, which is the end of page 1, is going to have significantly better click-through and engagement. And even better than that, if you get into that kind of top 5, you're going to have significantly better click-through yet again. So we're really shooting for those first 5. Top 9 is great. And then kind of anything over 10 is going to be this low-hanging fruit territory. So what does it look like? It looks like this. And I realize that this is kind of an amalgamation of colors that may not be visually pleasing. But in Google Search Console, you can export up to 1,000 rows at a time. If you don't have that set up for your website, I strongly recommend doing so. It collects a lot of really useful query data, as you can see here. So we're going to export this. It kind of depends on how you want to run it. If you're going page specific, you can actually filter by page just to get a little bit more kind of value out of those 1,000 rows, really keep it relevant. If you're kind of thinking in a more broad sense in terms of what do we need on the site, you could also just leave it unmodified and go for 1,000 top rows and see what you can find. What I've done on this sheet, just to give you kind of a breakdown of it is I set the impression range for only things with impressions over 250. So we've axed everything under that. Kind of anything under that is pretty low volume, because this is a 12-month pull. We're filtering the position for 5 to 20. So anything ranking higher than that, I'm just not going to deal with right now. That's not to say that there aren't highly valuable keywords in those ranges, but it's not what we're going to be kind of easily actionable right now. And then essentially what I'm doing in the queries is kind of filtering for specific words, finding out how many queries I have, what are the total impressions around those words, what kind of modifiers am I seeing, and starting to kind of extrapolate trends. A nice way, honestly, to do this in Google Sheets is to open up a new tab and run query functions in Google Sheets, just because it kind of lets you aggregate data quicker than having to pick through. However, I think I ended up with 260 rows on that sheet. So if you can get some query functions, they're pretty simple once you get the hang of them. And then what I've done is I've highlighted here basically based on kind of a high, mid, low for each column. So you've got high, mid, low for impressions, high, mid, low for CTR, and high, mid, low for position. And the reason I'm doing that is because essentially comparing those three numbers is going to give you some vague sense of the direction to move in, right? Because if you've got extremely high impressions, like that Moz local duplicates up at the top, and you have a 0 click-through, that's a pretty clear sign to, at the very least, check the metadata first. But maybe you don't have as much volume, but you have a really high click-through. Look up the potential for that keyword. Maybe you're missing out on some stuff. Maybe you need to make sure that you've got your modifiers kind of showing up on that page. So another way to do that, which frankly I've kind of moved to because it's easier, is our Explorer tool. I'm going to show you in just a moment, but it's essentially you can run all the functions that I just talked about, or kind of all those filters, in real time without breaking a sweat. So instead of opening up a new tab, you kind of just open up the tool and dig through some data. It pulls a significant amount more Google Search Console data than Search Console natively allows. So natively, I think Search Console limits you to 1,000. And if you use their API to pull the data, you get a bit higher than that. This essentially kind of games the API and lets us backfill data so that we can hit that API limit kind of over and over and over again until we have our full data set from the last 16 months. It's pretty nuts. So I have included a link here. If you're curious about it, definitely go check it out. It's under our tools section. We have a whole page set up, and we have kind of setup assistance for it as well, because it does require some data pipelining. So great, this is all fun and games, but how do I actually do any of this? Well, let's go into it. It's going to be fun. In this case, what I've done is, and of course I've set this up a little bit, we've gone into, this is Search Explorer. This is in fact a slightly outdated version. And I'm just looking at our data, right? So we're just going to kind of take a look through here, for example. I've been running through this a little bit this morning just to make sure that we have a decent example, because that'd be frustrating if we didn't find anything. So as you can see, we're August 1st to February 14th. It's about 6 months of data. You can see your trends here. So,
hey, Max, can you zoom in a bit?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Let's see. I can probably get away with that. Let's see.
That works.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So you can see your kind of trend data here over the last 6 months. Our impression trend is going down a bit. That's a little worrisome. Our position, typically position remains pretty flat. So we're kind of on average sitting around 11, 12. And our click-through rate looks like has been getting a little bit better lately, but not super high or consistent. So what we're going to say is, okay. Yeah, so this is unmodified now. So if we go into see low-hanging fruit is what we were just looking at. If we reset that, this is our aggregate. So we're struggling a little bit on our clicks lately. We're struggling a little bit on our impressions. This is the perfect time for us to say, all right, what can we redo? So immediately, this is just the standard Search Explorer page. It kind of includes everything. If we really want to do a lot of deep diving and digging, this is a page that we could absolutely use to get all of it done. So let's just start with see low-hanging fruit. That was that first graph. We've got a chart here of all of our queries, which are kind of within that 5 to 20 range. We've got low CTRs. We've got decent impression volumes. And we're going to say, okay, you know, our Moz articles we've updated recently, so we probably don't need to do that. Why don't we take a look at data storytelling examples? So I'm just going to click on that row. Okay. So you'll see that these charts have updated up here. So now I know, you know, we haven't been ranking very well for it. We're pretty sparse on our clicks. Our impressions are going back down. Okay, so this is going to be probably worth an investigation just because we hit a plateau and we're dropping back off. Might as well make sure that this page is performing correctly. So if I click this link, it's going to open the page that we're talking about. This is one of our blogs. It's one of our really well-performing blogs, generally speaking. So why don't we say, right, it's data storytelling examples. Let's pop in data up here. And we can unclick this. Okay, so now we have a list of queries which contain the word data, which are mostly ranking for this 8 data storytelling concepts with examples, with a couple of exceptions. So the fact that I'm seeing other pages in here, I'm going to say, all right, let's hop to another page. I'm going to go to Topic Explorer. We're going to do the same thing. Let's input data here. Let's pop on the see low-hanging fruit. And now what we have is an idea of what pages are ranking for anything with data in them, right? So we have a majority here, 7,000 impressions going to that 8 data storytelling concepts. We then have about 600 other impressions, which are ranking for a number of other pages. That's not too worrisome, but ideally this would be one page. You know, data may be a little bit too broad. Maybe that's pulling in a bit more than I'd like. So why don't we say data story? Yeah, that's better. So for data storytelling, this is the one page on our website. That's good. We want that one page to be gaining this ranking value. We now have a list over here of queries that include data story. We have a total of 35 of them. And if you'll see in this right column, most of them are sitting right on the cusp, right? We're at 10 to 13 average for these queries. So that's about 5,000 impressions over 6 months. You know, just under 1,000 impressions a month. This is pretty worthwhile for us. You know, that's good traffic. There's a percentage of those folks then that will convert on, you know, maybe it's the newsletter, maybe it's signing up for our data analytics webinar or whatever it may be. So I'm going to do a few things here. Let's go back to this page. I have this extension, which we name later on. It's called SEO Meta in one click. It sounds spammy, but it does exactly what it advertises. And it's going to pull your metadata. So title is looking good. Description could use a rewrite, right? Because we're just showing our author information, and this is primarily what drives your clicks. If we look at header structure, pretty solid. We've got some pretty good header layout. I'm curious about the 8 commandments of data storytelling, right? Because we have that as a header, but we don't necessarily have the 8 commandments as headers. So that's kind of an interesting point of information for me. So I'm then going to, I'm going to kind of go down the page, take a look through. So there's that 8 commandments header, and you'll see that this is in an image, right? An image with text. So that could probably use a revamp, maybe just get some kind of extra information, or use these bullet points and put these as headers above them, just to give kind of some informational hierarchy to the page. I did this already so that we wouldn't have to wait for it. So here's a page speed insights. We just checked the AMP page. We've passed all our core web vitals. We're getting a 73 out of 100. That's well within acceptable ranges. We could do a little bit better there, but we've got our core web vitals passed. That's kind of most important right now. We can do a quick check. Let's just hit F12. Let's look for, we're going to do a Control F. We're looking for canon. There's your canonical. It's self-referencing. Perfect. No problem there. We're going to check down at the bottom. What are we linking to from here? So we've got other articles. We've got online courses. That's good. We've got more blogs. That's good. There's related topics. So I'm just kind of running through these. We're going to go over them in more detail, but these are kind of checks that I'm making, generally speaking, on any page that seems to be kind of in this striking distance realm or low-hanging fruit. The other thing I would look at would be this table here. I can say, okay, examples, examples, example, example. Clearly, maybe we want to mark something as an example because that seems to be highly kind of queried in this space. Maybe we want to bust out a retail example. Here's another example. Good example. Media and entertainment, if we have any. Like these are things that you can kind of start to say, oh yeah, data storytelling is good, and maybe we could include even more examples of data storytelling, or kind of industry specific, or our process for determining these things. Because it seems to be that there's interest around those queries. So that may have been kind of quick, but let's get into kind of what I was just looking at, and frankly, why, because it may not have been super clear in that quick run through. So my typical parameters are going to be 6 to 10 is low first page, high second page is 11 to 15, and low second is 16 to 20. And those are, that's the high, medium, low that I was showing you back on that Google Sheets slide with all the crazy highlighting. Typically, CTR and impressions are really dependent on the business. So I would, your data better than I do, kind of set an impression minimum where you tend to see that it drops into that longer tail kind of highly specific query. CTR, gosh, this could be all over the place, but generally speaking, under 0.5, you've probably got room to grow. Between 0.5 and 1%, you're kind of middling, you're doing okay. Anything over 1%, I would say, frankly, you're doing pretty well. And even kind of low 1%, you could still probably get a bit higher. So that's generally how I break out those. And then our typical optimizations are going to depend on kind of the relationship between those three, are the, high, mid, low. So if you have low volume and low click through, maybe that query is not worth a whole lot. Or maybe we're hitting a version of that query that's not worth a whole lot, and we need to kind of broaden the page's scope. Position is largely about how Google sees you. And you need both, right? We need to make sure that our customers can find our pages. We need to make sure that our customers find our pages and are interested in them, which is our click-through. And then we also need to make sure that Google doesn't hate us, which is way easier said than done. But convincing Google that you're a trustworthy, authoritative source is absolutely necessary for this process. Users can trust you all they want, but you definitely want to pair that with Google's trust. So here are my 10 checks, right? Starting with, I think, if you've worked in SEO for any significant amount of time, this has crushed you under the heel of its boot many times. Metadata is exhaustive. Generally speaking, any indexable page, you want to make sure that you have metadata, page titles, and meta descriptions in place. Google has recommended character limits, which we provided here. And then I think the art of metadata is the inclusions of primary, secondary keywords, meta descriptions. You really want to have that prompt, that call to action. So this is like your easy starting check. Have we done metadata for it? And does it make sense for what the search intent appears to be for the page? So typically I focus on primary keywords the first time through, and then upon revision, I'll go for secondary or modifiers. Just because it's kind of a nice way to like fine tune once you have that placement of exactly like how you want them to read. This is really great for that topic explorer page that I was showing you, right? If we had rewritten the meta description for that storytelling page, take away the author information, and we could have included example in that meta description. Maybe even in our call to action, look at our examples, our data storytelling examples today. And that gives them a really clear, relevant, and actionable reason to pursue that page. Typically, you see metadata improvements needed on pages that have really high impression volume. So you're getting seen a lot, but your click-through is just non-existent, right? If you have a 0%, like we saw on that first slide, if you have a 0% on 11,000 impressions, check your metadata. This one's kind of curious. So header structure is one that Google has deprioritized because Google. And I think a lot of people took that news as, well, headers aren't going to be kind of a part of ranking anymore. And that's not quite true. Headers are still the way in which Google understands the rough outline of your content. So, everybody's written a research paper before. You have a research paper, you've got 3 paragraphs, and you've had to lay them out with paragraph topic, subtopic, subtopic, subtopic. Maybe you even have some subtopics. Header structure is just your research outline. That's all it is, right? We're letting Google know what's the main topic on the page, which is your H1. What are your subtopics of that main topic? Those are your H2s. And so on and so forth. You can go however deep you want to. The kicker here is that while header structure is not necessarily like, they're not going to say like, well, your H2 is just great, so you get position 9. Go get them, champ. But what they might say is, you versus another page, you have H1s, H2s, H3s, and you have about 15, and they're all highly relevant, and they hit very specific questions or kind of explanatory topics. They might give you the edge on that just because your content is a better user experience. That's something that Google says a lot, user experience. And they tend to really just mean like, how happy are people going to be reading your pages? So good for HTML tables of contents as well. I do want to call that out because that's a big thing lately. And it really breaks up information. It makes it easier to read. After that, we're going to look at, this would be a more technical check. This relates to kind of site structure, right? Being intentional about your site structure. So in Google Search Console, on the left side, there's a links tab. And it actually has a lot of really interesting and useful information about kind of volume of links to pages. So on our right here, we can see the 2 October's internal link structure. So SEO content is huge. Paid media management is huge. Our homepage, doing great. But these are our most linked pages on our website. And what that shows Google is that this is the most important content on our website. So when you're looking at this tab, maybe you have a service page. It's getting great impression volume and it's getting great click-through, but for whatever reason, the position seems a bit low. It may be that Google is thinking that this isn't a very important page to you because maybe there's just not enough internal linking structure behind it to kind of indicate this is an extremely valuable page. So checks are, is it in the top navigation? Is it linked as a resource on other relevant pages? Is it linking to other highly relevant pages? And then when it is linked, is the anchor text specific to the content or to the topic? And there's actually a few other checks that you can do on this. Internal links is a bit of a rabbit hole. You're going to get into like site structure discussions. Are we really set up the way we want to be? But as a quick check, this Google Search Console section is really useful. There's also on the Explorer dashboard that I was showing earlier, the site structure page on that report. And maybe in Q&A, if you stick around for Q&A, remind me. Let's go through that page because I think it's fascinating as a technical nerd. Oh, don't think my GIF loaded in. So competitor audits. This is also something that we call SERP analysis. We didn't really do this for the 8 storytelling page that I like, data storytelling page that I had looked at earlier. And that's because these are pretty time consuming, but immensely powerful. I'll probably mention this a couple of the times as we move through the rest of the 10, but essentially what you're doing is you're looking at the 10 top websites on Google's search engine results and auditing them and saying, do they have the metadata? Do they have the right number of internal links? Do they have the header structure? Are they linking to high value pages? Are you missing markups? Do you have better page speed, which we checked for ours, which is doing okay? This is all information. Frankly, this is what your teachers told you not to do in school. This is, look at everybody else's answers and see if you can improve your own. And this can be wildly powerful, especially if you're already in close competition with another company and you're outright missing something that they have included on their page. You may just end up taking that spot above them. This is a manual review, generally speaking. So you can do it on SEMrush, kinda. You can do it on Ahrefs, kinda. But typically how I'll do it is I'll go through the first page and I'll go to each of the top 10 results and I'll look for all this stuff, make all these checks on those pages and kind of make myself a chart. This one is easy to miss and to kind of ignore, but don't. Canonical links. are essentially telling Google what's the original page. This is purely technical and very, very basic. We thought about actually taking it out of this presentation. But because Google has a bad habit of disagreeing with canonical choices, it just bears mentioning. So if you're looking at your data and you're seeing kind of low impression, low position, but your click-through is really good, typically that means that you're serving to the right audience, but you're not serving or being served in a high enough position to make a difference. So it would be useful to go back through Google Search Console, and you can actually look for inspect live URLs. So you could run it through the inspection tool, and it'll tell you if it's canonical to a different page. You could also do what I did, which is press F12 if you're on Windows, and it'll take you straight into DevTools. And you can just do that Control F, looking for CANON. Typically doesn't pull up anything else. And you just want to make sure that that URL is the right canonical, right? If this is the original page, that URL needs to be the URL for this page. If this isn't the original page, it needs to be pointing to whatever page is the original. And generally speaking, you should be doing the work on the original because the original is what's going to rank. So if you're in e-commerce, this is huge for product pages, particularly if they're listed in different kind of sections of the website or in the catalog. If you have different pathing to get to the same page, you really got to be intentional about your canonicals, and this can really hurt e-com efforts if you have them marked incorrectly. So it's always worth a double check. This was one that was brought up by Noah the other day as we were getting ready for this, and it made me kind of slap my face and go, duh, because this is kind of the best example of enrichment of a page. So we had talked about competitor audits. This would be more for products or services websites. So if you're kind of an informational or more specific to like comparative content, I would look at most popular rather than top selling. So, most popular blogs and articles, most popular reviews, or, best locations that we have in the state, etc. If you're in commerce, this is great for top selling or easiest to use, whatever vertical you may be in. So if you're really killing it on your impressions, maybe your click-through is even good. Your position is maybe 0.5 off of the first page, or even better, like 0.5 off of the top 5. This is a great way to link to relevant resources, other important pages on your website, to get some extra page copy, frankly, because your anchor text is going to be still counted as text. And product names, product features, all of those are adding little bits of keyword matching that kind of shifts the intent in your favor. Not to mention, you're including links to kind of actionable next steps for users, which Google tends to see as kind of positive user experience markers. So this is a really killer check. If you're doing well, you have everything that you think you need on the page, this is a nice way to kind of push that teetering page up a notch. Oh, my favorite, FAQs. Similar to that top selling or the most popular, these are your frequently asked questions, but there's a way to leverage this with Schema, which I think we'll talk about maybe even on the next slide, where you can really push these answers into Google and Google will take notice. So the Explorer has a question page. Typically, I would use that. If you are in Google Sheets and still kind of trying to just break down the data that way, I would probably stick with words like how, what, why, when, where. Those are kind of your basic question words, and then pull a list of anything that includes those, and then do all the filtering yet again. But the reason this is really powerful is because the people also ask. Rich result in Google's search engine is, I mean, this is maybe a little flippant, but it's up for grabs, right? If you answer a question really well in a few sentences and you're really confident in your answer, great. Get it onto a relevant page, get it into an FAQ structure, and then use the schema markup to really push it into Google and say, I've got the answer. Put me in, coach. So FAQs are immensely powerful, and you can have, as long as you kind of are intentional about giving them the right titles, you can actually have multiple sets of FAQs on a website based on, maybe you have 4 different products. You could have an FAQ for each of those 4 products, mark each of them up, and they'll pop up depending on the search. We did that quick check on Core Web Vitals. I wanted to mention this because while it's technical and kind of behind the scenes, and very rarely is this going to gain you multiple positions in one fell swoop, this is one to just check on. Core Web Vitals is essentially the page speed metrics that we used to obsess over in long, detailed docs with lots of small numbers. Core Web Vitals are an easier way to look at that. So you've got largest contentful, that's going to be your above the fold, generally speaking. First input delay, how fast is your server? Cumulative layout shift, is your formatting doing weird things? So anything longer than 3 seconds to load, Amazon, Google, and a couple others have done some research about that. Anything beyond 3 seconds can be pretty significant drop-offs to site traffic and engagement on the page. So trying to beat that 3-second mark. And then in addition to beating that 3-second mark, we want to make sure that these 3 are passing. So you want to have a fast enough server, use a content delivery network if you don't have one. Cumulative layout shift, make sure your CSS is performing nominally. And largest contentful paint usually is about like making sure that your prefetch or your deferrals are in place and performing properly. Google Page Speed Insights is great for this. You can actually do this in dev tools with the Lighthouse tool as well. And that's another one for office hours. But in the Q&A session, if you're really feeling geeky, let me know and we can dive into some dev tool stuff, because you can get really, really specific with dev tools. And again, that was Noah that showed me that. So making sure that we're doing okay here is basically just a slight competitive edge. This, along with some of these other checks, can make really significant differences in aggregate. So again, these 10 checks are meant to be done all at once, essentially. Schema markup, one of the quickest things to check and one of the most annoying things to fix. Schema markup is basically using a markup language or format to make specific information on the page easier for Google to process. And what that does is it makes it eligible to be pulled into People Also Ask, featured snippets, maybe site links, or if it's going to be, trying to think what else. Oh, product reviews for product pages can get pulled into organic results. It's wildly powerful. The kicker here being, it's really easy to check if you have or don't have it. There's the rich results test from Google. There's also, if you use the Moz bar, it'll tell you if you do or do not have schema. So I would recommend that you use schema very intentionally. You want to make sure that it's associated with high value information wherever it's placed. There are more general schema markups. If you go to schema.org, it's really hard to read, but it's essentially a database of every markup that exists. There are easier ones like Steal Your JSON, or well, pretty much you're looking for JSON LD. And that's the schema language that Google has already said, this is what we want. Please stop doing the other stuff. So like, yeah, might as well adhere to that. If you can get JSON on pages, you can do local business markups. You can do product markups as long as you have reviews or pricing information. You can do FAQ markups. You can do blog markups. I mean, truly anything that you have on your website could be schematized is the right way to say that. And so just give some thought about, if you don't have schema, where would it be helpful? What are the basics? And if you do have schema, is it all working? And is it placed on the right things on a page? So is it placed on FAQs? Is it placed on the big what question, etc. And then this would be, it really depends on the industry that you're in. I typically think that this is really useful for retail, anything with brick and mortar, because you can be listing all of your local businesses near their location on a product page or whatever it may be, to really make that next step extremely actionable. If you have unique offerings for a particular product at different locations, great, call it out on the page. Have a page for each location with information about how to get there, services that are unique to it, inventory, if you can figure out that feed work. Obviously contact information, address, etc., because all of this is going to reinforce Google's opinion of you and improve the likelihood that these users are going to take an action at one of your brick and mortar stores. It's a little bit more difficult if you have, maybe your B2B service and you don't have multiple locations where you want people to walk in. You just have the one. Okay, fine. Make sure that location is still well documented, because Google is still going to use that to compare to other listings for your business to make sure that it's real. And then once they think it's real, to make sure that you're organized, frankly. Also, if maybe you have a couple of office branches and one office branch has one service and another office branch does a different service, great. Call that out so that users are going to have a better experience of finding which person to speak with at the company. So location information can be wildly helpful. You can put a lot of kind of local landmark information in terms of how to get places, contact information Google loves. So if you're kind of right on the edge, this especially is great for if you're kind of at position 6 and you want to try and break into that little 1 through 5 golden zone. This can kind of help you get that really unique, specific information on the page so that Google's like, oh, you're real and you're right here. Yeah. So those are my 10 checks. And again, I'm trying to do these together, right? So I know that there's an issue. I know that I've seen these numbers. I maybe have a place to start, but at the end of this check, I really want to make sure that I've gone through, maybe even quickly, all 10 of these to be sure that I'm hitting every opportunity I have on a page. You may notice that Kermit the Frog is one that I love. So don't panic. That was a lot. We do have Q&A coming up. And I think before that, we're going to be going into...
Yeah, hang out here for just a sec. I thank you, Max, for all of that great information. And I am really excited to see what you can do to that blog post, right? Take these 10 techniques for that blog post that's just like at position 10, 11, 12. Let's see if we can get it back on the first page where it has lived in the past, but for whatever reason, it sort of slipped. So hopefully you guys learned some good things from sort of how to identify those low-hanging fruit by looking at the data in Google Search Console to identify high impression share, low click-through rate, ranking right around that 10, 11, 15 area. We will be sharing this presentation with you so that you can peruse those 10 steps that Max has described and use them on some of your low-hanging fruit keyword and page opportunities. So we'll share that information and would love to hear how it works for you. Can you go to the next slide? So as a thank you for coming today, we are doing a little giveaway. So one of the things that Max shared, you can do all of the research we described in Google Search Console, free tool, really useful data. We've made the Google Search Console data even more useful in our tool to October's Explorer. So as Max showed, it really makes that research stage so much easier to do and really sort of fun. I mean, you're in the right crew here if you love looking at that kind of data and digging into what you can find there. So I'm excited to announce that we are giving away a free setup of this tool, which is $150 value. Next slide. To one user who's on the line here, we're getting some really good feedback from some of the early users on this tool. It pipelines Google search data and stores it for the long term, and then gives you better ways to manipulate and slice and dice that data for research. So I've done an incredibly scientific random process of looking at the first letters in our chat, which was a thank you, TH, and the person who has a matching letter in their name, Tom, I would like to award you this free setup of To October's Explorer. So I will be in touch with you after this later today to share with you how you can take advantage of that. But all of you, we would love for you to go check out To October's Explorer, go to the website, our website under the tools section. You can see a walkthrough of what that tool does. We're going to be having live demos, scheduled demos of that tool starting in the next week or two. So join those as well. I'll go ahead and talk, Max, about the webinars that we have coming up. Max is on hold for Q&A, so please stay around. But so we do have we do workshops all year long. It's really part of our commitment to helping you grow in your career, share our knowledge about how digital marketing works, how to do digital marketing better. So coming up in February, just next week, we are doing a seminar. Our co-founder, Nico Brooks, is going to be talking about Google Analytics 4. So you've heard about it. When does it make sense to start using it? Why should you do that? And when should you be switching? It's not an easy switch. So this will help you get oriented about how to think about it. In March, we continue our series on how to use keywords for SEO. And our colleague Brett is going to be talking about how to find and leverage SEO keywords for producing e-commerce revenue. So if you work in e-commerce, please join us for that. And then in April, we will be talking about storytelling with Google Data Studio. So how to use Google Data Studio better for storytelling in digital marketing. Sign up for those, guys. We'd love to have you join us. One last pitch. Next slide. We are currently hiring for an SEO manager. So if you are based in the US, we'd love for you to check out that job description, see if you're interested, share it with your friends, and submit your resume if you are interested in joining this great team of SEOs. We do really fun work for our clients. We build tools in-house and leverage them for better results. So it's a great place to work. Especially if you're looking for a more purpose-driven organization, check us out. Back to you, Max. So question and answer. Yeah. So how we're going to do this is if you have a question, you have two choices. You can either type it out in the chat and we'll talk about it. if you would like to join us by voice, then just raise your hand. Let me know in the chat that you'd like to join by voice, and I can invite you to the stage, and you can choose to join with audio or audio and video and share your question that way. And that's always great. We love to hear from you directly, and Max can ask some good questions, make sure he gives you a good answer. So yeah.
Oh.
Wahoo.
And I did make some small promises too about kind of digging into a couple of things. So I may kind of in the meantime pull those things up so that I can just run through them.
Yeah, you pull those up, stick around, and Max can go through those. Does anybody have any questions about some of the tips that we've described here, how you look at the data maybe to find what those low-hanging fruit opportunities are?
And I promise that I am not going to bite your head off for any questions that you may feel are foolish, because it's almost never foolish. Google's kind of vindictive sometimes about these things. So happy to go through anything that may be on your minds. I'm going to pull up.
Kyle, let me grab you onto the, invite you to the stage. You should get a little query there that lets you join us with audio and video. Hi there. You want to turn on your mic? There you go.
Hey.
I am just a little bit about me. I'm in Denver, Colorado. I'm about a year and a half into an SEO position. So my question is, it has to do with a real estate company, and we have a site authority score of 50, and I'm having trouble getting some of the properties to get indexed onto Google. Like, I've been through Google Search Console and have tried the re-indexed and looked to see if there are any issues. The one thing I do see that's wrong is like Core Web Vitals. So I was wondering if Core Web Vitals would play a big part of Google not rank, or Google not putting our page onto the search.
This is interesting. Typically, I wouldn't think of Core Web Vitals as being an indexation issue. So typically, even if you're, you could have a score of probably 5 out of 100, and Google will still probably index you. It just might not be as high as they might have in the first place. I would imagine that you've done sitemap kind of declaration and submitted those to Google. Is that right?
Yes.
And have they flagged any errors or warnings?
So what they flagged was, I believe, the schema markup. So like the review, like it was all optional things to fill out, and it didn't really make sense with the property. Like,
right.
So yeah, I'm just unsure what to do.
That's curious. Mm-hmm. Well, I've had my fair share of indexation issues in the past. I would probably check, as kind of quick checks, robots, make sure that nothing's getting disallowed.
Mm-hmm.
I would check, this is kind of silly sounding, but I would check that those pages have index and follow on them, which would be a dev tools check. Chris, am I good to move away from this Q&A page if I wanted to show some things? Cool. So we're gonna why don't I do? We'll just use 2 Octobers as our constant guinea pig. So coverage coverage, everything here. So no errors, no valid with warnings, or if they are valid with warnings, it's because of the schema kind of optional fields.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you've done, for every property, you've done your sitemap declaration.
I'm gonna have to check that, actually.
So check your sitemap declarations. I do find that that's one that's skipped over a fair bit, and is what I would recommend is like your step 2 in Google Search Console is just make sure you get that down, because once this is down, it'll actually check this URL, every couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So if you kept making updates on that URL, maybe you added pages, you take down the old sitemap, you put up a new one. As long as you keep it at that same URL, it's going to just check that new sitemap and update it and pick up the pages that you wanted it to pick up.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so so the real estate, the realtors add in properties themselves, and it drives me crazy because they don't optimize the images properly. The images aren't the right sizes, and I just don't have the capacity or the control really to help them out. But thank you for showing me where to look. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries, man. And I know that frustration. Where you're kind of like, yeah, please do this process for every image, and they're like, we'll do it for 3.
It's like, and then I get dinged for, why isn't our website running fast?
Yeah, that would be one to look into. Platform. Maybe there's something automated. I do find that some companies don't necessarily have the dev resources. And they don't necessarily feel comfortable sharing kind of access to make those changes with someone they don't know, or a third party.
Our company does the development custom.
Oh, okay.
So it's something I would check in. That I'm going to check in with them. So, but anyways.
Yeah, maybe automators. That's what I would look for. And,
okay.
And we typically do the same. As if it's a really procedural task like that, oftentimes you can find something to kind of just zippity doo dah.
All right.
Get it nailed.
All right.
Anyone
thank
else?
you.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle, for
thanks.
being brave and asking a question. Anybody else have a question you want to ask, or otherwise Max is going to take us back into October's Explorer, the site structure you were talking about. But feel free to raise your hand or put a question into chat as well. We'll be here for about 10 more minutes, Q&A. But stay or go.
Yeah, if you give me too much freedom, I'm just going to start digging into these weird pages.
No, zoom in too.
Oh, right. Yep. We've lost our zoom. Let's do one more. There we go. All right. So this is site structure. I said I was a big technical nerd. This is kind of where I like to reside. What this is giving you here is it breaks down the pathing on your URLs. So for example, events. And if I sort by events, anything with /events/, it's going to show me not only my queries. So then I could go up here and say, query contains, let's say, data, because that's what we were working on earlier. This is now giving me the events pages that include, or that are ranking for keywords that include data. We've got 2 pretty good ones here. So Search Console API. Oh, wow. And these are both the same. So we've got about 4,000 impressions coming from this page with 0 clicks. And so this is kind of just an easy way. So maybe we didn't want to know about events. Maybe we wanted to know about under tools. What are we ranking for under data tools? Not much, actually. Well, Data Studio, because, yep, we do a lot of Data Studio stuff. Let's go into blog. That'll be a good one. And here it's just aggregating your impression volumes for these sections. So like the blog is getting 36,000 impressions. That's really strong. And then what you're going to do here is you're going to dig down into, okay, what pages are generating the most of those? And out of those pages, kind of, are there any queries that we're clearly missing? I think the clearest example here is examples, examples, example, examples, examples. And it's very clearly that 8 data storytelling concepts with examples. And so we're right on the edge. If we maybe broke out, this I think is probably where I'll start, is getting this broken out into, for example, begin with a question is going to be an H3 probably. End with an insight, H3. Let's just make sure I'm doing that correctly. Yep. So we're nesting it under this H2 for the 8 commandments. And we're going to bust out these high level kind of titles, basically, as headers, just to give Google a clear understanding of like, oh, it's the 8 commandments, and here they are. That's where I'll start. And we're going to go back here. We're going to say, okay, examples. So maybe we get, maybe we switch this to an example of the 8 commandments of data storytelling, because this is a generalized example. Or maybe we include it in a subheading as, this is just an example, but. And then what else are we going to look at? We're going to look at, images that tell a story. We could probably, let's see if that's ranking for the right page. It is. So visualizations and images, we could probably discuss that. Do we have that at all? That's a pretty good one. Maybe we make this into a header because it's not currently. Same with this. Honestly, that's probably the kicker. That's going to get changed. So best examples of storytelling. I might even add example to the contest line just to get into the H2 line. But we could also be H3ing, telling a compelling story. These are going to be the same thing as those 8 commandments, reinforcing these keywords. Explain with visuals. That's going to go into that data visualization storytelling. But if I said, you know what, I'm done with this data topic, I don't want to learn about this anymore. Let's learn about paid search. And we're looking at our blog again. It's going to real time. I mean, that took what, 5 seconds, 6 seconds. And it's just sliced and diced all our data and said, great, in the blog, here are things that have paid search as keywords. This isn't great volume, but let's just say paid instead. Getting a little bit longer tail here. Let's say business. What do we have for business content? That's pretty solid. We're getting good volumes on those, right? So this is one of our best articles in terms of kind of reach. These are great listing sites. If you haven't seen this blog, definitely check it out. And we've got them linked. That's really good. And we're capturing pretty good click-through rate on there. Or so it seems. But we could be doing even better.
All right. Well, let's just last call for questions. Anybody have a question around applying, helping maybe one of your pages get over that low-hanging fruit hump? Last call for questions. Really appreciate everybody joining us today, and hope you can check out one of our future webinars.
And of course, feel free to reach out to us too if you have something you just can't solve and you need to kind of do some soundboarding or even more difficult problems that we need to kind of hop in and do some work on.
All right. Happy Thursday, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Max, for taking us through all that great information, and we will see you again later. Bye, everybody.
Thank you all.